Hello and welcome back or welcome to my world, I.E.R. I.E.R is a little project of mine where essentially non-avian reptiles reclaim their former glory, existing in a world after the advent of humanity. In this series, I plan to describe species of my speculative evolution adjacent world through teaching you silly viewers concepts in biology, creature design, and evolution, while showing you cool speed paints. So, sit back! I say speculative evolution adjacent project because I'm going to forego some rules that allow for more ancestral diversity and to result in more different designs that I can explain to you through the language of biology. Also, I thank you guys so much for the continued support on the last upload, and get ready for this one because it's going to be a whole lot of fun, okay? So, let me set the scene. After the workings of humans had led to the destructions of themselves and most other endotherms, the great Mother Nature began to reclaim her land. Increased carbon dioxide, heat, and water in the atmosphere would promote exceedingly fast plant growth, helping the initial plant retake over of the industrial world. Over time, strong plant matter and hard fungus have replaced the actual buildings of humans while maintaining their general shape. These living buildings would flourish, cities full of life, be it plants and animals instead of working humans. Frolicking through these jungle streets are the Cervusaurus, the deer lizard, our focus for today, with two primary species: the blunt-beaked anole, Cervusaurus herbis, and the narrow-beaked anole, Cervusaurus frugus. Take a guess at what they eat. It's pretty on the nose. Get it? Cause like if you look at their faces, then it might give you a hint at what they eat because they're more equipped for eating certain things. Subscribe for more silly jokes. At a glance, you might get some anole vibes, especially since I also just called them anoles. Well, quite frankly, that's because they are anoles. In a way, at least. They evolved from our modern anoles, specifically the Carolina anole, also known as the green anole. This is the same species that you'll probably find at your local pet store. Also, did you know anole is pronounced anole? I actually had no clue about this until I was researching for this, so I'll be calling them such for the rest of the video. Anyways, allow me to drop some more basic knowledge of the Carolina anole on you. Also, for sake of not saying the whole government name of this animal, I'm going to be simply referring to them as anoles. When I say anole, I'm referring to Anolis carolinensis, the Carolina anole, not any other species, specifically the Carolina anole. Anoles, as you might know, are small lizards. They reside in North America, primarily near the Caribbean, but can be found as far north as the Carolinas, hence their name. They favor subtropical regions where they eat insects and sometimes dabble in fruits and seeds. Like the chameleon, they can change color, though not to the same degree. Anoles are limited to a gradient of brown and green. Anoles also have dewlaps, which are the strange display structures you see here. They are used to communicate with each other, and male dewlaps are larger and more colorful, and of course are used for the freakazoid display and rival intimidation. They do still throw hands though, well, they throw jaws, and wrestle with other males over females and territory. That is a pretty basic generalized overview of the Carolina anole, but it paints a pretty solid picture. I'll go more in depth to specific areas as we later describe the analogous parts of the Cervusaurus. Speaking of which, Cervusaurus could also use a pretty basic description as well. While I mentioned earlier, there are two species of note: Frugus and Herbis. Frugus, or more commonly referred to as the narrow-beaked anole, has, well, a narrow beak. It's the more basal species and is leaner built with proportionately longer legs than its contemporary. Its diet consists mainly of fruits, insects, and small vertebrates. The other species, Herbis, or the blunt-beaked anole, is more derived and heavily built. As you can tell, its beak is much wider, as the name implies. It grazes on Okay, wow, we're just gonna do it again. It grazes on low-growing flora, primarily grass. Both species are roughly the same size. At the shoulder, they stand at about 1.5 meters or 5 feet in freedom units. and are very quick gallopers. Yup, they gallop. As you might notice, this is a pretty stark contrast compared to the sprawled limb posture of most reptiles, which include the Anoles. The sprawled to erect gait pipeline is a strange one, though it has happened at least a couple of times. I'm gonna run through a quick crash course on what it is and how it happens real quick. So, brace yourselves. In the most basic terms, sprawled gait refers to the posture where your arms are positioned to the sides of your torso and abdomen. Basically, imagine laying on your stomach and spreading your arms and legs out to the side, like modern day lizards do. It's the original tetrapod posture. An erect gait refers to your limbs being positioned right underneath your body, instead of out and to the side. So basically, picture any terrestrial mammal or dinosaur. It's believed the main driving factors for developing an erect posture from a sprawled one are being more energy efficient and enabling the animal to breathe and run at the same time. However, it is to be noted that an erect gait would also help animals bear more weight and generally provides a wider foraging range. Let's take a look back at the Triassic period, when the erect posture became more popular. Reptiles and other various sprawlers are everywhere. These species are likely all ectothermic, meaning they rely on their surroundings for heat. They are also unable to run and breathe at the same time. This is because muscles used for the side-to-side flailing that reptiles do while running compress the lungs and make breathing very difficult. This would make running an activity that could only happen in short bursts. It would also be hard to sustain due to oxygen requirements and energetically costly as the entire body is exerted whilst doing so. And given their ectothermy, energy needs to be conserved as much as possible. Eventually, through some trial and error, remember guys, very important, evolution is not linear, some species would undergo some evolutionary changes that allow the legs to be positioned underneath the body. Here are some of those changes. A strengthened hip directly fused to specialized fused vertebrae known as the sacrum would provide lots of support for powerful underbody legs. Specialized ankle bones allow for, well, ankles that can be manipulated to support standing pillar-like limbs. This would also free up some of the abdominal muscles used during the left-right flail motion that restrict the lungs, which would allow the lungs to function whilst running, boosting the endurance of the animal by a noticeable margin. To maintain such a posture, endothermy would also develop, allowing the animal to be more energy efficient with its movement. Also, these legs would be able to support much larger body sizes, as weight would be placed on strengthened legs, not the stomach, and movement could happen with much more ease as you're more directly supporting your body weight while you move, and not possibly dragging your body along the ground and fighting friction. If you look at the largest reptiles alive today, like Komodo dragons or crocodilians, in their resting posture, their stomachs are on the ground. However, when they go to walk, they raise their bodies off the ground. This is a semi-erect posture, and it is to be noted that at least a semi-erect posture is essential for a larger body, because being incredibly heavy and trying to drag yourself along the ground at the same time can be pretty difficult, especially when the legs are on the sides of your body. It is to be noted that there are multiple different paths taken to an erect gait, though the one I described just now, I believe would apply best to Cervusaurus, so it's the one that I'm referencing. Anyways, this whole ordeal has happened many times. Other than the original Archosaurian ancestor that I won't name because there's likely controversy surrounding it, you might notice that Pseudotsuchians switch between erect and sprawled postures quite often. Caprasuchus is a pretty popular example. This is because an at least somewhat erect posture is the ancestral form of Pseudotsuchian, so they're more equipped to go from either primarily erect to primarily sprawled or primarily small to primarily erect, as they already have the basic foundation to build on, the basic hip foundation to possibly turn into a more erect hip or a more sprawled hip. The early synapsid ancestor of mammals developed these traits independently of archosaurs. This probably tells us that the erect body plan is a good one. We know this to be true, as ever since Pandora's box of bright walking has been opened, it's been the dominant form in the majority of the ecosystems in which such a stance has been introduced. So, if such a body plan is so great, why isn't everything doing it? Why are there still lizards in our modern day world that are ectothermic and throw their hands to the side? Well, in short, they've been relegated to a niche that favors an ectothermic lifestyle and seeks little incentive to change. Their current body plan has been proven to work for them for millions of years, so why change now? Especially when that would lead to more competition with other species that are already built for high energy lifestyles. An erect posture would likely require some level of endothermy. A smaller ectothermy body means less food to maintain, which means less competition. Also, a jump into endothermy would require a lot more food, as your body would be constantly needing to make its own heat. This means more competition, and a larger body would be more appealing for predators that are already more than equipped to dispatch you. Evolving to be bigger wouldn't really benefit most species, especially when many are jumpers and climbers. However, in a world where there are no predators to stop you and enough resources to get big, you will get big. And as you get big, supporting your body would be easier with strong legs underneath of you. Besides, that's something that Bone War veteran Edward Drinker Cope suggests, that often species within a lineage would gradually evolve to be larger over time. Meaning, over time, it's generally understood that animals get bigger. Very, very generally, because it's not always applicable, because nothing in evolution is always applicable, because there's islands and extinction events and everything else, because in extinction events, then large body sizes kind of don't really work out very well, because you require more food, which is really hard to get, yada, yada, yada. But, in a vacuum, if there's a ton of resources, and nothing's stopping you from getting those resources, over time, you will become a bigger species. Now, with that out of the way, we can finally talk about Cervusaurus. I'm 3 pages into my script, and I've barely even mentioned the focus of this video. I would like to briefly mention that though both species are contemporaries, Cervusaurus herbis derives directly from Cervusaurus frugus. When I refer to Cervusaurus without a species name, assume it applies to both species. As you might have noticed from the drawing in the background, the Cervusaurus does possess a fully erect posture. This posture would require various physical changes to the Anole body plan, specifically the ones mentioned earlier. Aside from the obvious increase in limb length, the hip bones of the Cervusaurus would become much larger and more secure as the sacrum strengthens. The foot would become digitigrade, the toes being the method by which the animal stands. Stiffened ankles with a wide range of motion and strong tendons help make movement more fluid as they are gallopers. Though there is something I didn't mention about galloping. It usually requires a spine that can move up and down. Why are you asking? Well, first, let's take a look at any galloping animal. If you name any galloping animal, watch it run, its spine go up, down. Horses, deer, various canids, felids, crocodilians. They all possess the ability for the spine to bend up and down. This is due to the fact that the limbs are straight underneath the body. If the spine was unable to move up and down, then the animal would likely have to do some really wonky looking waddling that would be much slower and exhausting than just galloping. The reason side-to-side spinal movements work for most lizards is because usually their relatively shorter limbs and smaller overall weight requires less force to generate speed. If you compare two similar sized and proportioned animals that have two different methods of running, like the Komodo dragon, a large sprawl runner that, according to Wikipedia, are roughly 3 meters or 10 feet long and weigh about 70 kilograms or 150 pounds, to the Cuban crocodile, a galloping crocodile roughly 2.3 meters or 7 feet long that weigh also about 70 kilograms or 150 pounds, the Cuban crocodile runs faster. Highballing the Smithsonian's measurements, Komodo dragons run at a speed of 13 miles per hour, or 20 kilometers per hour, while Britannica says the Cuban crocodile can reach up to 22 miles per hour, which is 35 kilometers per hour. They're about the same weight, yet the different limb and spine morphology of the Cuban crocodile allows it to run marginally faster than the Komodo dragon. The Cuban crocodile's spine has a much higher vertical range of motion than the Komodo dragon's, which allows it a gallop-like run, which is typically faster than the side-to-side run of the Komodo dragon. However, these animals have vastly different proportions than the Cervusaurus. I just compared them as they are both reptilian and have similar limb lengths and body sizes. There aren't really any sprawling comparatives to a deer or a dog because simply something like that just wouldn't work out well. To run quickly, a vertically moving spine would be a requirement for an animal of similar proportions, like the Cervusaurus. Most lizards, however, maintain their ancestral oceanic roots and primarily move their spines left to right, making galloping hard to do. Remember what I said earlier about the whole left-right flailing that lizards do in order to run. Lucky for us, anoles have some ability to move their spine up and down, relatively more than other reptiles. And you know what? No explanation, we're just gonna push this to an ungulate-like range of motion, allowing it to gallop like a deer. The spine would become stiffer and more sturdy, but able to move vertically with ease. The spine can still move side to side, but that's not the default for movement anymore. The scapula or soldier blades would need to be able to swing across the ribcage for a galloping forearm motion. The tail can no longer fall off, but rather has strengthened to allow for more muscle attachment for the leg, as well as to serve as a counterbalance for the head. This does make Cervusaurus less nimble on the run, but it can achieve greater speeds. To enter sprint, Cervusaurus would lunge forward, pushing off the ground with as much force as possible to create instant distance. It would then follow a pattern of forelimb 1 touches the ground, then forelimb 2, then hind limb 1, then hind limb 2. Only one limb ever makes contact with the ground at a time. And this fact is true for the entirety of the sprint. This gallop is for fleeing predators as they do not try to fight them at all. It is all flight for the Cervusaurus. No fight. Avoiding predators isn't usually a hard task for the Cervusaurus. Usually Cervusaurus is rather aware of its surrounding and keeps safe distance from any possible predators. It can usually outrun them in a chase, fleeing as far and as fast as possible. However, an extremely persistent predator could cause problems. A well-camouflaged predator that can sneak up undetected is also a problem. Said predator jumping out of the foliage at the Cervusaurus could make it difficult to respond. Usually their response is bolting away, but sometimes one might freeze up and either attempts to remain undetected by the predator. Most of the time, however, the predator isn't going to simply lose its prey item simply because it's standing still. The freezing is related to the behavior of camouflaging that is ancestral to anoles given their ability to change color among greens and browns, and this behavior just never disappeared as it does help young Cervusaurus remain undetected in the brush. And it's also noted that this little freezing thing affects Frugus more than it affects Herbis. Up until now, when I've said Cervusaurus, I've been referring to both species, Frugus and Herbis. But that's because information provided has been applicable to both species. The only differences are slight proportional notes like how Herbis being more rotund and Frugus being more slender. But now I'll be referring to them by their species name as we're going to talk about what makes them so different. Their skulls. Let's tackle one at a time. First, Cervusaurus frugus, the narrow-beaked anole. It's the more basal species, so I figure it would make more sense to address it first. As I mentioned earlier, it's omnivorous. It eats small vertebrates, invertebrates, and fruit. It does so with a beak. Anoles do not have beaks. What is going on? Time for another pipeline. Put on your helmets and put on them thinking goggles. It's time to go down another evolution pipeline. Before we begin, I mentioned that Herbis derives from Frugus. Frugus developed the beak before that happened, so the actual development of a beak only happened once in these silly Anole descendants. So, how do you make a beak from not having a beak? To answer that, we should probably understand what beaks really are. So, what are beaks? Beaks are tough, keratinous structures that extend from the mouth and replace the function of incisors or like teeth. They are a hardened structure with a bone core covered by a layer of skin that produces keratin. This allows for constant growth of the beak to counter wear and tear. Beaks are usually a herbivorous trait and help cut through hard plant material or crack nuts or seeds that smaller teeth couldn't. Compared to smaller teeth, a fused beak structure allows for higher pressure bites for crushing incredibly hard material. Instead of needing to pull and wrestle with weeds, a beak cuts like a scissor. One strong, wide snip tears through plant material. You don't see many carnivores developing beaks because, well, teeth are generally more versatile for dealing with moving prey and consuming large, fleshy corpses. The smaller size and pressure points of teeth can deeply puncture flesh more easily, causing a prey item to bleed, which both reduces the energy of that animal and can leave a trail if it gets away. Beaks are present in reptiles, mammals, fish, and a number of invertebrate groups, and have evolved in these groups multiple times. Actually, it's kind of a lie. Mammals haven't actually developed true keratinous beaks. Egg-laying mammals, known as monotremes, developed a soft, leathery beak that isn't really an actual beak. The reason that mammals haven't yet achieved beakhood is likely because,
Other than the fact that most mammals don't hatch out of eggs,
mammals drink milk from their mothers, and it's probably better if they don't snip off the teats when they do so. Also, the flexibility of the lips help with the whole milk thing, yada yada mammals, who cares, I'm off topic. Outside of mammals, beaks have developed multiple times in each of the listed groups: fish, reptiles, and various invertebrates. So then, what do beaks develop from? Egg teeth. Egg teeth are keratinous structures that help infant animals bust themselves out of their eggs. They aren't usually permanent and are shed within a couple of weeks of hatching. As I understand it, the main hypothesis of beak evolution is that during embryonic development, instead of forming teeth, an expensive, time-consuming material to build, the keratinous egg tooth would simply expand over the jaw, creating a hard, permanent plate that, instead of shedding, would grow continuously throughout the life of the animal and replace the function of front-of-mouth teeth. Like all things evolution, the full replacement of teeth would take a very long time and wouldn't be a linear development. Many species would possess both beaks and teeth, and actually, this possession of both beaks and teeth can be a pretty good feature, especially for large reptilian herbivores. Since most reptiles are homodonts, meaning they only possess one type of tooth, a beak would allow for the cutting of plants while still maintaining specialized teeth used for chewing. We see this in marginocephalians, thyreophorans, and ornithopods. You see this extremely in an ornithopod group known as hadrosaurs. And I guess those are all just all those groups just make up ornithchia, but these beaks evolved convergently in each listed clade, possibly more than once per clade. This means a beak was likely a useful tool for herbivores and not incredibly hard to evolve. In the Cervusaurus, the beak would evolve similarly, however would take place after the whole erect posture thing. The reason for the beak in Cervusaurus is, well, crushing chitinous arthropods, crushing hard fruit, tearing apart dead logs and such without mutilating your mouth. First two are rather obvious. It's much easier to get to the juicy center of hard-filled insects and crustaceans if you can break their carapaces. I think that's how you say carapace. The increasing surface area of a beak with a relatively small point of contact would allow cracking shells to be done with much more ease, same with fruits, especially firmer ones. So, then, what about logs? Do they eat wood? No. But, you know something about wood? When it rots, it's great for hungry insects. And it's even greater for nesting insects. And you know what the Cervusaurus just loves to eat? Insects. If you look at modern day insectivores like anteaters, sloth bears, and pangolins, I know pangolins are small, but for the sake of what I need to explain, they all have bulky claws for home-wrecking insectoid abodes. For the Cervusaurus, this simply won't do. Not only are Cervusaurus arms not really built for grabbing and tearing, but they also need to stay light for quick movement while running. Carrying big old claws could slow them down and could possibly make their run more awkward. Instead, the mouth would deal with such log and mound destruction. A crushing beak would not only help the general destruction of logs and mounds, but unlike a fleshy mouth, beaks don't bleed. A beak like that of Cervusaurus frugus would make accessing these nutrient-rich arthropod breeding grounds a lot more easily accessible, as the risk of a mouthful of rotting splinters is a lot lower. The hook of this beak that you see helps wedge into the bark and pull said bark off, accessing to more food, roughly translates being more fit, yada yada beak good. The possession of a beak also doesn't encroach on the ability to hunt vertebrates either. Since the Cervusaurus preys on vertebrates much smaller than itself, a singular bite is more than enough to kill a prey item, and teeth wouldn't be needed to pull flesh or bleed out a prey item, as such small vertebrates and invertebrates can go straight down the gullet. As for embryonic development drivers of such a beak, less time and energy devoted to building teeth is instead replaced by less expensive keratinous material that would form the beak, leaving more time and energy for other aspects of the animal to develop, so that when the animal hatches, it would be ever so slightly more adept for survival. Besides, teeth aren't that important anyways, though this isn't to say that teeth aren't absent. In the Cervusaurus frugus, teeth come in after hatching, although they aren't really used for anything. They are small and, well, they're in the mouth. Don't really do anything. Not really needed for much. And I think that wraps it up for the mouth of Cervusaurus, so let's look at the other one. Don't bully him, please. He's just a silly guy. I mean, why the long face? Cervusaurus herbis is a plant consumer. Since nothing was going to stop the swift Cervusaurus frugus from trying to turn over a new leaf and eat foods aside from its regular diet, it ate foods aside from its regular diet. The abundance of grass was certainly appealing. I mean, what else is going to eat grass? It's very hard to digest, even for herbivores. I mean, it would be incredibly hard for, a reptile to digest grass. Wait, grass digestion is not easy, and grass itself is not very nutritious, and the stuff it's made of, hard, fibrous cellulose, is generally difficult to break down. Animals that feed primarily on grass are specialized to do so. Grass eaters require large and complex digestive systems to actually extract a proportionately beneficial amount of energy. Think of a grass eater. Let me guess, you thought of a cow. Cows eat grass. They are really built to consume mainly just grass. So stop feeding them corn. Anyways, look at how weird they are. They have 4 chambered stomachs compared to the regular 1 chambered stomach. No maxillary incisor teeth. They have incredibly flexible tongues so that they can intake grass and chew simultaneously. Hence the gum tissue pad. Picture it. They grab food with their tongue in their weird gum tissue pad and they still have teeth chewing in the back. Both at once. They also regurgitate grass that has already been in the stomach to be rechewed in the mouth and then swallowed again. And then there's the whole microbes and intestines thing, along with the bone structure and everything else. Everything just to eat grass. Grass is hard to eat. And usually for a grass eater, there's a lot of fermentation involved. Gut fermentation is basically just utilizing microbes in the gut to digest food for you because your body is unable to digest such food naturally. Food comprised of dense cellulose, which is the stuff I said was a large component in grass, typically requires such a process. So then, how does the Cervusaurus herbis go about the whole grass thing then? Fungus. It consumes fungus. What? How? Fungus? We're talking about grass here. What's going on? Fungus not only provides a good amount of protein for a grass consumer, but it also helps gut fermentation. Some species of fungus are great for breaking down fiber-dense plants like grass, and actually are used by many grass eaters in the modern day to break down grasses. Grass eaters will consume these funguses to put those microbes in their gut so they can break down grass. And after I've said grass eater thousands of times, I just learned that grass eater has a name. It's called a graminivore. Graminivore means something that primarily eats true grasses. The more you know. Anyways, did I mention that cows do the whole gut fungus thing? Well, they do. They get microbes from the fungus, which is exactly what the Cervusaurus herbis does. Consuming fungus introduces microbes into the gut that breaks down grasses. Voila! Gut fermentation. While grasses do make up a bulk of the herbis's diet, it's not a selective feeder. The fungus can deal with just about any low-growing plant. Flowers, ferns, leaves, whatever, I don't know. It just sticks its face into the ground and consumes whatever greenery might be in its way. Hence the wide beak. This wide front beak also allows for a large intake of food, and since it's a beak, it's constantly growing and self-sharpening. This also allows the teeth to help break down food instead of working to get food into the mouth. If you remember, I said that the Cervusaurus frugus has teeth, but they just kinda aren't very useful. Most frugus meals can go straight down the gullet, no need for teeth in that process, especially when there's a beak to do the work for them. Grass, however, is something that won't go straight down the gullet. It's not completely true. It's still possible to digest grass without chewing, it's just a lot easier to do if the grass is chewed. The teeth of Cervusaurus herbis are not really overly specialized, they're just hard and sharp for cutting up plant matter that's in the mouth. They maintain the basic dagger shape, and as mentioned earlier, they're homodont, meaning they are all the same kind of tooth. In Cervusaurus frugus, the teeth shrink and maintain their basic shape, and in Herbis, they've simply become bigger again. Kind of. As the maxillary row and mandibular row of teeth meet each other in the mouth, they rub against each other and cut like the edge of a pair of scissors. The tongue of the Herbis moves around in a constant circular motion to move plant matter across the mouth so that the teeth can cut up the plant matter as much as possible before entering the stomach. The chewing mechanism is very basic. It doesn't involve a very flexible jaw like it does in mammals, it's just open and close and repeat. Swirl it around with the tongue a little bit, get a little freaky style in there. Anyway, since this guy is a predominant gut fermenter, its torso has become larger than that of the Frugus, allowing for larger intestines and a large cecum for said fermentation to occur. The cecum is an organ that connects the large and small intestine and serves as a site of fermentation or microbial digestion. At least that's where a lot of it takes place. Cecum also does a couple of other things, but you don't gotta worry about that right now. Anyways, in many gut fermenters like horses, elephants, rabbits, etc., the cecum is proportionately very large compared to non-gut fermenters. This is because undigested food ends up here, and so do the digesting microbes. Hence the reason for the larger torso in Herbis. Cervusaurus frugus's torso is, well, thinner. It doesn't need to create extra room for longer intestines and larger digestive organs for digesting the material of highly concentrated cellulose, as its diet is much easier to digest. The dewlaps, which if you remember are these skin flaps under the neck, and in either species they are differently shaped and differently colored. In both species, these dewlaps represent the health and the age of the male. This dewlap has almost disappeared in females, as originally, in females, their intended use was to display aggression, but now the preference is to just run away. So it's shrunk, because running away is a lot easier without a massive flap of flesh hanging under your neck. In males, the size of the dewlap represents age, and the vibrancy represents nutrition. Bigger and brighter dewlaps show an older, better fed male. They aren't really used in any sort of elaborate mating display, but rather hang as a constant billboard advertising the mateability of said male. The mating season of the Cervusaurus is always. Once reaching sexual maturity, they can mate whenever. Year-long access to nutrition means egg laying can happen at any time, though that is to say child production is usually higher when it's warmer. Like their Anole ancestors, females lay one egg at a time. 3 weeks after insemination, one full, highly developed egg will be laid in a ditch dug by the mother and covered in soft foliage. In Cervusaurus herbis, the eggs are usually laid a lot of fungus so that the child can quickly get its initial gut microbes. Hatching typically occurs within a month of laying, and babies are born precocial, meaning they are ready to fend for themselves and take on the world. For this species, mating isn't a very interesting process. There's no grand display or anything. If a female catches sight of an attractive male, she will approach him, she will then mate with him, and they will part ways to probably never see each other again, unless they run into each other and they see each other again. Social interactions of these species are pretty minimal. They don't herd, they live most of their lives in solitude, like true edgelords. After birth, an individual will be able to reproduce in just over 2 years. They are born alone and typically survive in the underbrush, lying low and avoiding predators as they grow and prepare for the world. For Frugus, this is usually when most of the insects are eaten. A young Frugus individual can break into a rotting log or similar insect housing structure and find a buffet of good quality nutrition. Insects can be quite nutrient dense and are relatively easy to consume, as long as they don't sting. They make up most of the young Frugus's diet, along with some fruit for extra carbs and so much. Generally, insect eating starts to fade out towards adulthood, as snack-sized vertebrates are larger and can be hunted with similar ease. For Herbis, it consumes a large portion of fungus when it's young, jump-starting the microbial gut biome for fermenting its primary food source, grass. And while then, it consumes grass. Once a grass eater, always a grass eater. And that's all. I don't really know best way to end this, so need a better way to end these. I feel like this just kind of falls off, stops, Anyways, sorry for the wait. My intention was to release this 2 weeks after the Opus Bears video, which you should go watch if you haven't and you're made it this far, because you'll definitely like it. But then I got a week of schoolwork of doom and despair, so I didn't get it out when I wanted it to, but I hope you enjoyed this, and you should subscribe if you're not, and share this to everybody. especially especially that one child, Spread the word. Thank you.